This is the 401k Fridays podcast, and I'm your host, Rick Unser. If you're a retirement plan fiduciary or administer your company's retirement plan, you've come to the right spot. Our format is pretty simple. In each episode, we select a timely and informative workplace retirement plan topic, we pick the brain of an expert guest, and provide you the hard-to-find perspective you need to make informed decisions that benefit your plan, your employees, and company. Now here we go with this week's episode. Could retirement income be the hot topic of 2021? Well, it was supposed to be the hot topic of 2020 with the Secure Act, and then we got a little derailed. To chat through this with me today, I am happy to have Doug McIntosh, Vice President of Investments for Prudential. And we go through all the stuff you would expect us to. What is retirement income? What are the employer attitudes, employee attitudes? Some of the biggest concerns still left around retirement income, despite the fact that the Secure Act seemed to provide a lot more protection and safe harbors for plan sponsors who want to include it in their lineup. And we also hit on a lot more, including public policy, the legislative environment, and things yet to come. This was a very timely and informative conversation, and I hope you get as much out of it as I did. Before we get started, don't forget, if you're not subscribed to the podcast, please take a minute and hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app, or go to 401kfridays.com/subscribe, and there's a bunch of buttons you can click that'll take care of that as well. That's it. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Doug. Well, Doug, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I got to be honest, retirement income has been something on my mind. So I'm glad we have an opportunity to chat about it today. So thanks for being here.
You bet, Rick. And same here. Thank you so much for having me. It's a treat and an honor, too. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Well, I got to say, with the passage of the Secure Act in 2019, I think 2020 was, by everyone's estimation, coming into the new year, supposed to be the year of retirement income. Obviously, we got a little sidetracked, to say the least. So I guess where we sit now, sort of end of October of 2020, is 2021 going to be the year of retirement income? Are we kind of rounding the corner there where the focus will pick up and the light will shine on retirement income in workplace retirement plans?
Yeah. What's that old phrase, Rick? Life's what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Right.
We had that same sentiment, no question about it. And indeed, early in the year, the traction was early in 2020. The traction was pretty significant from an income perspective. And then, of course, COVID and CARES really took over. But I think, from two different perspectives, and setting aside the possibility of other sort of geopolitical, medico-socio type things happening, which, those wild cards are always out there. But setting that aside, I do think for a couple of reasons that 2021 is the year of retirement income. And I say that for, for a couple of reasons. One, we have seen the focus swing back to income, and the level is at about the same spot it was at the beginning of the year. So real interest, real traction. And we are spending a lot of time talking to our sponsors, to advisors, to regulators, to good folks like yourself on the topic. And we're starting to see plans take the decision to move forward with retirement income options as well. And then the second is that the hammer is not being let up in Washington, D.C. Now, I can't predict what's going to come through in a week's time, let alone what sort of legislation we might be seeing in the next Congress. But we have started to hear talk about a Secure 2, even to the point of hearing somewhat sort of nitpicky details of what's in there. Hey, a couple of corrective issues to some of the things that got overlooked in Secure, or some of the little details that need tidying up, and then a few other sort of forward-looking things. So long story short, I think 2021 we're going to see the continued momentum, and we may see some more legislation as well.
So super helpful as a backdrop there. One other thing that I'd really love you to just dive into for a minute is, what is retirement income? I mean, I feel like there's some different definitions or different ways that you can just define that. So would love just to get your perspective on that and kind of help level set for the remainder of the conversation.
Well, I think we could use that famous and kind of overused phrase from Nobel laureate Bill Sharp, figuring out how to get money for the rest of my life when I don't know how long that period is going to be is the nastiest, thorniest, toughest, I forget exactly how he put it. Pretty sure nasty was in there. Nastiest question that any one of us is going to try to overcome. And so when I think of retirement income, I tend to start with a pretty generic definition. And that is, I'm going to live an uncertain amount of time. I need income during that time. How am I going to get it? And any one of a range of different options can be used by itself or in conjunction with others to help me address that issue. So we can think of guaranteed options for sure. And you and I will talk about that a little bit as our conversation goes on. But I think we should also be looking at non-guaranteed options as well and examining the ways in which smart folks in the asset management and retirement services industry are looking to help deliver products of that sort to individuals.
When you talk about retirement income, and I think about some narratives that have been out in the market over the last few years, and I think maybe this is a bigger topic or conversation, but I think retirement income really plays into it, is this concept that people aren't retiring, this concept that people are staying in the workforce longer, and that's negatively impacting employers in some way, shape, or form. As you talked about a minute ago, kind of the people having this unknown life expectancy, obviously, the concept of outliving your dollars, not having enough money to live out your golden years, the proverbial not wanting to end up eating cat food. is that, I guess, does retirement income, if this works the way that everybody projects it to work or would like it to work, does that help, or is that a big driver for employers behind that kind of larger conversation about managing their workforce and helping people achieve timely and successful retirements?
I think so, Rick. And there are a couple of different ways to address that. One is sort of explicitly what you're talking about, and sponsors come at it from a variety of different angles. I'll try and portray those a little bit. But there are also some ancillary benefits, which employers are now beginning to get hip to, if you will. So let's think about this for 1 second. I'm gonna quote a client of ours, and this is an organization that is a financial services organization. They are not young; they've been around a long time, so very strong, stable organization. And their head of HR said a couple of years ago to me, "Our folks who are getting to retirement age want to retire, but they're afraid to. And we want to help them get there." Now, that, I would argue, is the approach of the paternalistic plan sponsor. They're looking out for their folks, and they're trying to do something good for them. And helping them feel comfortable about being ready to retire is certainly going to help them along those lines. But you can also look at it from a different perspective. And I've got a colleague here at Prudential, our head of sales, who oftentimes says, we're trying to help organizations that are struggling with individuals who are, quote, retired at their desk. In other words, I'm going to keep working because I'm not sure I'm ready to retire financially, but I'm kind of mentally checked out. And that's not good for anybody. It's certainly not good for the participant, but it's not great for the sponsor either. And so introducing retirement income options and a plan that goes along with them can help on both of those fronts. Here's the other really interesting thing. We find that introducing retirement income concepts and services and products can actually help participants while they're still working be better savers, be better investors. And to give just a quick idea of that, when we look at the data from the 2008-09 Great Recession, we find that participants with a retirement income option in their plan saved more, 38% more on average than those who didn't, and were far less likely to jump around in terms of their allocation than, again, those participants who didn't have a retirement income option, 2.5 times less likely to change their allocation. And if we fast forward to this year, market peaked on the 19th of February. I think in terms of the S&P 500, I think the Dow Jones peaked a couple of days before, but the 500 peaked on the 19th of February, troughed on the 23rd of March, and then 10 trading days later, had, and this is, I couldn't believe it when I went to count the numbers, but it's true. It sort of freaked me out. 10 trading days later, the market had recovered 75% of its prior high. So keeping participants in their allocations through periods of volatility can have really beneficial results. Now, I'm not trying to predict the way the next market meltdown occurs and how long it lasts. And frankly, I'd be surprised if it took only 10 trading days to come back 75%. But the point still stands. Helping participants by injecting retirement income into their plan can have a benefit that goes beyond just, I'm going to be ready to retire. It can actually improve my behavior while I'm working.
So I totally agree and hear everything you're saying. I guess, why isn't retirement income more prevalent, more prominent in retirement plans today?
I'd argue that it's largely because of inertia and the evolving regulatory landscape. First of all, inertia, I like to describe inertia as the participant's superpower, but I think it applies to plan sponsors to a certain extent as well. And we have to bear in mind, plan sponsors have fiduciary, not just responsibility, but also liability. And that is a very important driver of behavior. So going into new arenas is something that the fiduciary does with justifiable and understandable caution. And then, of course, we've got the evolving regulatory landscape. Now, I could point you to a bunch of plan sponsors who said before Secure was ever even sort of in the draft stage, hey, we got what we need. And indeed, we can go all the way back to 07, 08, for example. 08 was the first safe harbor for annuity selection, and say, well, the elements have been present. But when you get a package like Secure that addresses things like portability, which has been very important for plan sponsors, and sews up the safe harbor, boy, I think that's a real powerful element. And that's part of why we think in 2021 we will see increased uptake.
So let me ask you to get maybe a little more specific on a few of those points, because I think, generally speaking, I think the message that the Secure Act has made retirement income a more palatable option for plan fiduciaries, I don't know that there's a lot of great understanding in kind of an easy, succinct way. Well, okay, that sounds great, Rick, but what do you mean? What protections do we have now that we didn't before? Or how has this made retirement income more friendly to us or less of a risk to us if this is a path we head down? So is there an easy way that you kind of explain that to plan sponsors?
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is in terms of logistics, and that's the portability component. I'll come back to that in 1 second. And then in terms of the specifics of the safe harbor update contained in Secure, let's take those in reverse order. What's most notable about the safe harbor language in the Secure Act? Well, it builds upon the 08 safe harbor, and it goes beyond it. And it says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Plan Sponsor, or more specifically, to use the actual regulatory language, Mr. and Mrs. Fiduciary, if you do the following, you will be deemed to have taken all the actions necessary to derive the protections of the safe harbor, and specific to examining the financial strength of an entity that is delivering a guaranteed vehicle, you cannot be held liable if you get this letter of representation from that entity. You get an update every single year, and you complete a relatively straightforward search for alternatives. That crispness of language and the delivery of that letter, which we have been sending out the door since February of this year, is to our clients, to our plan sponsors here at Pru, that gives a great deal of comfort to plan sponsors. It's really black and white language. On the portability front, to turn back to the first issue, I characterize it as kind of a logistical thing. Life happens, right? Like we said at the top. And for a variety of different reasons, it may be necessary to either discontinue an option or move from one record keeper to another where the option's not going to be available anymore. In that instance, being able to say to participants, hey, it doesn't matter that you're under the age of 59 and a half. You now have the option to retain your benefit, to keep both your market value and your guarantee value intact by taking this action, typically moving into an IRA, great deal of comfort for the plan sponsor. And it doesn't matter whether they're coming at it from the paternalistic perspective or the, hey, I want to minimize my liability perspective. It's the same outcome. The participant is kept whole. And one of the interesting things that we find when we scan the marketplace is that the organizations who look like us, who have these options, have done largely similar things. That is to say, reduced costs wherever they can to make that move from in-plan to IRA as financially painless to the individual as possible. So when you go from in-plan to an IRA solution, you're not tripling your cost. There may be a small increment of a few, tens of basis points at most, at least in our case, but you're not seeing 300, 350, 400 basis points worth of cost. No, you're still in the 140, 150 range, all in asset management plus guarantee. So that gives a great deal of comfort to plan sponsors. And I would point to those as the most important elements of Secure. If time permits, Rick, and if it makes sense, we can circle back and talk about the third retirement income element of Secure, which is the lifetime income disclosure. I think that's going to have an impact that is bigger in the public's view than either the first two that we talked about. But we'll defer that till we're ready for that.
Well, you can't just tease something like that and then walk away from it. So why don't you share what you're thinking now? And I would love to hear it.
Okay, thank you. That was a little bit of a setup, wasn't it? So viewed through the lens of an income dweeb like myself, and I've been at this since 2005. I was part of the strategy team that put together the first recommendation for Pru to go down this road. Lifetime income disclosures, it's not that big of a deal. The portability and the safe harbor, like I just said, those are critical. But let's turn it around and put our participant hat on. As a participant, what am I thinking about? Well, I've got a busy life. I've got a job that's complicated and just got more complicated because of COVID. And I'm not thinking about this lifetime income stuff. At some point next year, today we believe it's around September of 2021. We'll see if the timing shifts. There's a lot of commentary going back and forth between industry and the Department of Labor right now. But let's call it third quarter of next year. Participants will begin to see on their statement conversion of their current balance into a lifelong income number. That's new for almost every participant out there. Obviously, participants who have our product or similar products today are getting a disclosure of that sort. But for most of us, that's not the case. So all of a sudden, I'm going to see both a balance, which is, a relatively larger number, and an income stream, which is a relatively smaller number. And I think at that point, around the proverbial water cooler, whether we're back in the office or still sort of gathering virtually, participants are going to start asking questions. Hey, what does this mean? First question. And then the second one, hey, wait a second. Hang on, I'm a millionaire. I've got $1 million in my 401k. This thing's telling me I'm going to get $54,000 a year. And by the way, I'm just making that number up, sort of spot checking single premium annuity rates. It'll surely bounce around, but somewhere in that neighborhood is what we should be expecting. Hey, I'm going to $54,000 a year. How does that work? All of a sudden, we're having a conversation now about what is a reasonable amount of money I can get every year for the rest of my life. And importantly, from a household perspective, my life and my spouse's life as a lifelong income amount. That becomes a really interesting conversation for participants. And I think it's part of why we see participants who have retirement income products today contribute more. Why? Because I need more. I need more than whatever that number is. And that is going to be a very healthy, although I think in some cases a little bit painful conversation for us regular, normal human beings to be having with each other and with our employers. I can tell you that dynamic is one of the biggest things going on in the dialogue right now between industry and the Department of Labor. I'm doing a presentation in a week to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and a full third of our time is going to be dedicated to that very dynamic. We're trying to achieve something good as a matter of public policy, by injecting this conversation into the public consciousness at the participant level, let's make sure we don't demoralize folks by showing them a really small number, and also show them the path to how they can get that number to a place where, alongside Social Security and any other lifelong income benefit they may have, it's going to be a sustainable number for them. Ultimately, it's a good guide for the participant. It's going to be a wake-up call in the short run, no question in my mind.
No, that's great perspective. And I think, there's a lot of taglines out there, but obviously one of the ones that kind of resonates is income is the outcome. So that certainly feels like that's kind of obviously moving the participant portion of the conversation farther down that path to say, hey, I might be seeing more money than I've ever seen in one spot in my life, but in terms of creating income from that money that's going to last my entire life, maybe I've got a little more work to do before I can say, all right, I've got this retirement thing figured out.
Yeah, and when we take that approach, income is the outcome, which I love, and which we are saying here a lot these days, you realize it's not just about investment return. There's a lot of other stuff going on that impacts my income, that impacts my outcome. And that's a healthy dialogue for you and me and plan sponsors and sort of us industry insiders, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess my quick follow-up question to that would be, I feel like this whole retirement income disclosure, or sorry, I'm not getting all the words right, but I feel like this idea of having a projected amount of retirement income on participant statements has been around for a long time. I mean, I feel like that's been something that we've been trying to figure out for 5-10 years, maybe longer.
Sure.
And I'd be curious from your viewpoint, what have been some of the big sticking points, and why hasn't that materialized sooner? Where I think, again, just based on how long it's been out there, I'm kind of surprised we, quite frankly, aren't there yet.
Rick, you're not the only one. Oftentimes, we will colloquially refer to the Lifetime Income Disclosure as LIDA, which stands for Lifetime Income Disclosure Act, because there was indeed, going back quite a few years now, a standalone act. The intent was to have this happen on its own, if you will. But you make a good point, which is that we did not, in the industry, need a LIDA, an act, to get us to start printing or publishing on the web an estimate of what an individual's retirement income might be. What's different now is there's going to be a common mechanism, a common calculation methodology, and it's going to be given prominence on everybody's statement. And so I think that's going to, like I said before, at the participant level, really spur a lot of conversation. I think the fact that it comes with the force of law as well changes the conversation for us industry insiders, the sponsor, the advisor, the record keeper, the asset manager, the guarantor, and it gives it a higher level of prominence in our dialogue about how plans get put together and how we look to incent participants.
No, super helpful. And focusing on the participant side of things, what's been the attitude, or what's been I don't know, have there been requests? Have there been participants kind of saying, hey, I don't know, I come back to several years ago, obviously there were some requests for very specific investment funds, or there was requests for self-directed brokerage accounts, or you get requests for, various things from employees that are participating in 401k plans. I mean, do you get the sense that participants are saying, hey, employer, I want you to help me solve this retirement income thing that I'm trying to do to plan for my retirement?
Rarely does the participant articulate the desire quite so explicitly or quite so crisply. Typically, it's more, and I'm going back to the case that I quoted before, our large financial services organization, the participant is saying, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel ready. And when we double click, when we search a little bit deeper, we've done a fair bit of participant research, and so have many others. What we find is that the notion of deriving a lifelong income from their defined contribution balance is a really high priority for them. They may have a little bit of trouble articulating it, but they certainly say stability of my market value as I get older and the ability to generate lifelong income, hugely important elements for me, the participant. I guess I would say one other thing, and that is that because the life of the participant is a complex one, and because the sorts of things that we do for them in defined contribution seem arcane to the regular, normal human being, to you and me, it's like breathing air because, we're insiders and we've been doing it for a long time, but that's not the case for the normal human being, right? They see it as a dark art in some ways, as an exotic area of specialization. And what they're looking for is help. And to the extent that we can give them both help and confidence, we're doing a good thing. To the extent that we can help point the way towards a more sustainable lifelong income, oh boy, are we really doing a good thing there.
No, and to your point, I'd like to double click on that for a second, because I think what we're hearing in the marketplace, and I think what some employers who are interested in this topic are kind of getting the message of is, okay, there's more fiduciary protection. I've got a clearer path to offering this in my retirement plan and hopefully not ending up on the front page of the proverbial paper as, the next employer who's been dragged into an ERISA lawsuit over how they're running their retirement plan. But I think as you kind of get past that with some employers, the next question is, okay, well, do my employees want this? And I think the knee-jerk reaction is, well, nobody's banging down my door for it, so let's pass for now. And I would love to maybe just have you help whoever's listening kind of think through that natural pushback that I feel like there is to, whether it's exploring something new, doing something that's a little more on the cutting edge, and just kind of help others within their organization kind of say, yeah, I get it. To your point, we might not have people specifically requesting this, but here's a few other things to take away that are good reasons for us to put this on the next agenda at our retirement plan committee meeting, or for us to take this up in an HR strategy session, or for us to look at this as a bigger initiative or something that we would want to be looking at as an organization. So I've said a lot there. I don't know that I've given you a great question to work with, but that's any thoughts you have on that end would be super helpful.
Yeah, well, Rick, you're getting at something which is really, really important. And I'll say it again. I view the superpower of the participant as being inertia. So let's think back to 06 and 07. If we had gone in those years to a representative sample of participants and said, hey, how badly do you want to be auto-enrolled into your defined contribution plan? Right. They would have said, whatever. Or maybe if you had gotten them to, hang on, think about this for 2 seconds. Give me your real thoughts. They would say, well, it's the right thing to do. I'm going to enroll myself. Don't you worry about it. And yet, we find time and time again that life gets in the way. Inertia is the superpower. If you don't do it for them, they ain't going to do it for themselves. And then we could ask them the next question. So how would you like me to allocate your assets for you? And by the way, if you're young, I'm going to give you a fair bit of equity risk. Most participants would say, wait, what? What are you doing? Hang on. But when we do it for them, what's the stick rate? 85, 90%? Our experience with any default in defined contribution. I'm speaking just on behalf of Prudential, but I think this goes for many of the other players in the industry. It's around 85%. And that tells you that while I, the participant, may not be able to articulate my desire to be auto-enrolled, or my desire to have you put me into any one of the three things that the QDIA regulation said was appropriate: a balanced portfolio, a target date fund, or a managed account, sometimes referred to as a model portfolio. It turns out, oh yeah, I guess I did want that. I just couldn't articulate it for myself. Why is that? Because I'm a normal human being. I'm not an exotic financial, services or products expert. So yeah, go ahead and do it for me. And I think that gets to what you and I were talking about, off the air a little while ago. What does best practice defined contribution plan design look like? Very few of us would argue today that auto-enroll and auto-allocate, as I call it, into a QDIA eligible default is the right thing to do. That's clearly paying great benefits for participants. What are the next items that we should be thinking about as interested and responsible members of this industry? Well, it's auto escalate, because my contribution rate really matters. And it's auto income. Give me the opportunity to access some modality to derive a more secure, more programmatic lifelong income. It could be guaranteed. It could be non-guaranteed. It's going to differ for different populations, different demographics. But let's have that sewn up ahead of time and presented as a best practice for the plan. That, I think, is the wave of the future. And if we sit around waiting for the participant to stick up his or her hand and articulate precisely, hey, I want to have a guaranteed lifelong, a lifetime withdrawal benefit vehicle, we're going to be waiting a long time. Let's deliver to them and then see what their reaction is. And as you can imagine, when we do that, we find, and we're not the only ones, that participants are overwhelmingly accepting of that direction.
No, very well said, and I like the analogy there. And I don't know, I have to say this, but I think we've also learned that the inertia thing as well impacts plan sponsors, not just participants, because I don't know, I feel like the CARES Act and the way that rolled out was completely indicative that inertia is not just a participant problem. It's something that, hey, for those people that were sort of in an opt-out situation with the CARES Act provisions, 90% plus adopted them. For people that had to opt in, I think it was closer to 25%. So I think all of this is a big theme, whether it's plan sponsors, employers, et cetera. So,
right. It's a human thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are humans. Inertia is a big deal for us.
Yep.
And that's understandable.
So let me move us a little farther down the path here to, okay, I feel like I've got a reasonable idea of what's going on in income and employer attitudes, employee attitudes. So, okay, we're ready to take the next steps here as an organization. We're ready to say, okay, this is the next big thing coming in retirement plans. This is the next piece of our participants' retirement journey that we'd really like to support them on or help them on. Where do I go from here? What's kind of the next thing that, as an employer, as a committee, as a fiduciary, that we need to do to get us in the position of saying we're ready to select an approach, or we're ready to select a strategy that we would roll out to our employees?
There are, in my mind, Rick, there are three things that the sponsor wants to consider. So the first one is it points at the value that you and your colleagues bring to the table for plan sponsors, for plan fiduciaries. You're thoughtful, you're methodical, and you're scholars of the business. And I'm speaking about advisors, consultants, very, very broadly here. And so the plan sponsor relies on that capability to help set the table, look at the options, and then begin to winnow through those options as they get ready to make a decision about what makes sense for their demographic. So the first thing is the advisor's ability to deliver some real value there and structure that conversation for the plan sponsor. The second is to make sure, or to decide, what's the right mechanism for our demographic, and then to settle on how we're going to get comfortable with that mechanism. And as we said earlier in our conversation, the Secure Act and its beefed up safe harbor surely goes a very long way towards making that happen. And then, and that could be, a decision to implement, the most common mechanism of retirement income in the defined contribution space today, which is the living benefit or the hybrid. I get my cake and eat it too. I can get income for the rest of my life and my spouse as well, but I'm not giving up control over the underlying assets. Or it can be, hey, delivering an economically priced fixed option, which doesn't give me access to the underlying assets, but which on a dollar for dollar basis does give me a decent amount of income. And there's a trade-off there, right? If I'm willing to give up control over the underlying assets, I should be getting something in return. And indeed I do. Or if it's the third option, which is a non-guaranteed option, sometimes referred to as best efforts. And by the way, this is how we framed it when we spoke to the Department of Labor's ERISA Advisory Council a couple of years ago. The three ways to do this are best efforts, fixed, and hybrid. the sponsor will make the right decision with your help for their demographic. And then the last question is, okay, so how are we going to implement? And I would argue that the first part of that is, are we doing default or are we doing opt-in? And then the second is, what mechanisms are we deploying to help those participants, relatively few, aside from the ones who are quite close to retirement, what mechanisms are we deploying to help those participants understand what we've delivered to them and how they can utilize it? I always argue that needs to be a combination of both written and verbal approach. I've got to be able to deliver stuff as a sponsor in writing, but I want to make sure that my record keeper is going to be able to answer questions on the phone as well. And that delivers a very high level of comfort to plan participants. One other quick thought, and this may be, I might be looking down the line a little bit here, previewing what's to come in our industry. The rise of the managed account is certainly making itself felt. And I think that we're going to see more high touch as a result of those kinds of programs. And there's no question in my mind that high touch has to incorporate whatever the sponsor has decided to deploy as their retirement income option. So participants will derive that level of comfort when they're talking to another human being on the phone.
And you hit on exactly what I would wanted to get a little extra input or insight from you on, which is I feel like you're 100% right on what employers will have to think about as it relates to offering a retirement income. But I think there's also this component of, well, hey, I have a target date fund today. And I think some people are heading down the path of, or exploring the path of, well, if we take that target date fund and start to create a similar version of that would give a participant the ability to start protecting a portion of their investments automatically as part of that target date fund, or creating an income element within that target date fund. And then you also, you layered in the managed account side of it, which is, hey, I'm turning my money over to a third party. I want them to manage it. I'm going to give them some additional inputs and data on myself that maybe they couldn't derive just from an employee census that's been uploaded into the record keeping system. And as part of that management of my money, I either opt into or select an option that says, yes, I would like to have a portion of my income, quote unquote, protected, or whatever the right terminology is. But I mean, to me, I know that's not the definition of a hybrid approach, but that also sounds kind of like a hybrid, or maybe like I don't know if a half step is the right word, where if someone's not ready to say, all right, we're going to have a dedicated option, we're going to have a dedicated whatever, that, hey, we already have a target date fund, we're just going to tweak it a little bit. Hey, we already have managed accounts, we're just going to tweak it a little bit to add income. I don't know. Is that half step the wrong way to think about it? Or is that more of a full-on embrace of retirement income than I'm thinking?
Yeah, Rick, it definitely is more of a full-on embrace of not just retirement income, but also of dealing with the reality of human nature. How many QDIAs can we have? Only one at a time. Now, you can certainly have a so-called hybrid or dual QDIA where I'm in one a target date fund when I'm 25, and then I'm in a managed account when I'm 55. But I'm only going to have one at a time. And more importantly, like we said just a minute or two ago, the QDIA is hugely important because that's where the assets are going to stick. So if it makes sense to give participants access to a lifelong income stream or any retirement income option, be it guaranteed or non-guaranteed, let's bundle it with the QDIA. Let's make sure that it either wraps the entire QDIA or is a component of the QDIA. And you're exactly right. It is easy to tweak a target date fund. We do it all day, every day to include income. We do it in our day one target date funds, which are specifically architected to deliver an income benefit. But we also do it on other third-party target date funds. We can do it in our model portfolio capability, Goalmaker, and others can do the same, our competitors in the industry. And then lastly, as you identified, it can be done inside the managed account program. And that's something which I think any plan sponsor who is thinking about employing a managed account should say, hey, can you accommodate the full range of options, including things that might come about down the line. And what's great about delivering income in that manner, and I say that manner, I mean a sort of a programmatic fashion where the time and the percentage of amount that is delivered is predetermined and requires no action on the part of the participant. What's so great about that is that you need not engage the individual and have them take an action which they're predisposed not to do. It can just happen automatically for them. And, I don't want to sound cavalier about this, but we've been putting income into managed account model portfolio target date funds for over a decade. It's kind of old hat to us. We feel very comfortable logistically deploying it. And also from a sort of, an intellectual perspective, we seek to turn the income option on about a decade before retirement. Why? Before then, it's really not necessary. What's the most important thing? Just save some more. And then when I get closer to retirement, say a decade out, okay, now it starts to matter. I've got my pile, retirement's on the horizon. I'm starting to get nervous whenever the market wobbles. Help me out here, folks. And we can deliver that in an automated fashion, enormously beneficial for the individual.
No, thank you. And I appreciate your kind of expanded thoughts there. And I don't want to muddy the waters here, but I guess kind of thinking about the implementation aspect of it, I mean, is it fair to say that if an employer is kind of going through this, they can say, all right, well, do we want to create a standalone option? And then that kind of takes them down the path of, best efforts. I think it was guaranteed hybrid as kind of a standalone option, or as another big bucket way to approach this. It's like, okay, well, maybe we're not ready for a standalone option, but maybe we could consider tweaking an existing QDIA strategy or other strategy, and that maybe gets us where we want to be. Again, as you're thinking like decision tree, or as you're thinking about, kind of door number one, door number two options for employers, is that, I don't know, does that help maybe put what we've just talked about in some perspective? Because I hate to think if I muddied the waters here, because that certainly wasn't my intention.
Well, I hope I didn't also, Rick, but I think you're going down the right road. Updating my QDIA to take advantage of the latest developments in the industry makes all the sense in the world. And by the way, again, not new. If we go back to the 07 QDIA reg, 24th of October, we find that in that final QDIA regulation, the Department of Labor said, hey, if you tack a lifelong income component onto your QDIA, it's still a QDIA. So for over a decade now, 13 years, almost to the day, they have been telling us, the Department of Labor, that, you know what, go ahead, update your QDIA, put that income component into it. It's the right thing to do. All
right. One other thing, as you were talking, that I don't know, I had a great conversation on the podcast the other day with Dick Darian, as we were talking about just some of the business aspects of what's going on behind the scenes between, advisors and record keepers and investment managers and blurring of lines and all that fun stuff. Just a really good conversation. But as you were talking, one thing that I was also thinking about was, as it relates to retirement income and as it relates to, providing options within a plan, is there going to be a little bit of question mark or concern on, some advisors or some folks out there that say, hold on a second, if we put this retirement income option on a plan and we have a lot of people use it, that means we're potentially collecting a lot less rollovers on the back end, whether that be a record keeper, whether that be an advisor, whatever it might be. Just from a business standpoint, a big part of what makes the 401k business go round is what happens when people leave a plan. So I don't know, as you were talking through that was just one thing that I was thinking through and just saying, are we going to have a little bit of kind of competing forces here between, okay, well, what is the best way to provide retirement income to employees or help employees, think about retirement income? Is it give them an option or give them a strategy that sits within the plan? Or is it, hey, as an advisor, I can help you make all those decisions on a very personal level and do it, quote unquote, better than you investing in this hybrid guaranteed best effort strategy that the employer has? I don't know. Like I said, I was just thinking about that in terms of competing interests, in terms of what that looks like, and was just curious if that's something you've given any thought to or you've heard as a potential hurdle for some plans to kind of have to think through or work through with their service providers to kind of think about the best way to take care of their employees.
Have thought about it a lot, have heard about it a lot, and have seen it in action.
Darn. And there I thought I was unique.
No, sir. You put your finger on something that is alive and well right now. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the premise from which you depart here, Rick, is the rollover. And you're exactly right. That is the largest single movement of assets in the defined contribution world. It's the money leaving the plan going to some other place, typically an IRA. And that has not escaped the notice of players like ourselves and everybody else who is a part of the value chain of this industry. I think it's part of the reason why you see a fair bit of concern. I think you're characterizing it correctly on the part of some players in the industry who expect to be able to get a chunk of that rollover. I think it is also a fair point of conversation for the plan sponsor and the advisor who say, we believe it is right and appropriate and best for participants to retain all the benefits that they get from leaving their money in plan even after they retire. Access to professional help of the sort we've been talking about, access to lower cost options in many cases, those sorts of things are all good things for the participant. But we also have to look at reality, and that is most of the money leaves for whatever reason. And I think that to a great extent, that is partly driven by the desire of the individual to get professional support in a direct mechanism. If a plan advisor is prepared and that's part of their business model to deliver that kind of individual support, well then, bravo, they should have at it and deliver that where appropriate, where called for by the participant, deliver that benefit. Doesn't mean that we don't try though to deploy the sorts of options that you and I have been talking about in plan, partly because it's going to, we believe, and I think the facts bear it out, result in a better experience and a better outcome for the participant. And it's entirely possible, I think we're going to see this increasingly, that this will lead to participants staying in plan longer because they're deriving these options from their plan. And so I think that we look at both where we'd like to go, but also where we are right now, today's reality. And we make the right decision as sponsors, as fiduciaries, as advisors for participants, both today and where they may be headed tomorrow.
I appreciate you chewing on that. And I think what you said makes a ton of sense. As we move towards a close here, I guess a couple things that I haven't asked you that I'd love to get you to address. What are some of the things that can go bump in the night, or what are some of the things that you're hearing from employers about retirement income that you still feel like need to be solved, whether that's through DOL guidance, additional legislation, regulation? Are there still things that are left undone that need to be kind of sewn up, or do you feel like we've got enough regulation guidance to kind of wrap a plan sponsor in a warm blanket and say, all right, you're not gonna, the boogeyman doesn't have enough ammunition to come get you if this is a path you want to come down?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got, not to be immodest here, but Pru's got half the in-plan guaranteed living benefit market. We've seen tons of traction. So we feel comfortable saying there's, a nice warm blanket out there. And can only forecast more of the same happening. I should mention also that we are a member of a consortium, is not the right term, but a group of guarantors who collaborate with a third party, AllianceBernstein, that provides a multi-insurer vehicle out there that is also getting a ton of traction. And we're going to continue to see that on its own trajectory, if you will, very steep upward trajectory. They've just launched with the State University Retirement System of Illinois, for example, and employing it as their QDIA. In terms of things that go bump in the night, a couple of thoughts. Number one, when the portability option of the Secure Act is invoked, the plan sponsor and the current record keeper need to be engaged and deliver a minimum level of information to participants. And it's good to go a little bit beyond that level with a campaign of call-outs, if at all possible, to help ensure that participants understand what's happening and have the opportunity to take action. Not every participant will take action, and that's fine. That's their choice. But let's think about ways we can dot our I's, cross our T's, and make sure, yep, we've covered off on everybody. They've all heard about this. They've all had the opportunity to say, this is what I need to do. So that's one thought. And by the way, portability is also not new to us. Portability under 59 and a half is, but we've been porting, people with their guarantees for over a decade now. So we're, it's a well-oiled machine from our perspective. Here's the other angle, and I don't have great visibility into this one, Rick, because I just don't know what the future is going to hold, and in particular because so much depends on participant preference, if you will, and that is the world of the fixed guarantee. Let me explain what I mean by that. There are a lot of players in the industry, some in the world of the Department of Labor, lots in the world of the Department of Treasury, who are very focused on the benefits of fixed vehicles. And believe you me, fixed vehicles deliver some really strong benefits. The challenge, of course, is that by its very definition, a fixed guarantee takes the form not of an asset upon which a guarantee is built, but rather the form of a contract, of a promise. I am handing over a sum of money to a guarantor, and they're giving me back a promise. And that promise is the basis of our relationship. Now, that promise may involve a cashback option, a so-called death benefit, if you will. I pass away before I start to get my lifelong income. Well, whatever the amount of money was that I handed over goes to my heirs and my beneficiaries. But by its very nature, by its very definition, is not a plan asset, and that becomes murky. Will we see regulation? Will we see legislation that enables a more easy delivery of fixed options in plan? Perhaps. I think that's a space for us to keep our eye on. I call it a participant behavior challenge because in our experience, when you say to a participant, hey, I've got a great way to generate a ton of income for you, in particular, let's say a ton of income, relatively speaking, later in life, starting at age 80 or 85. It's called a deferred fixed annuity. Oh, says the participant, tell me more. Well, listen, you're taking longevity risk on your shoulders, mortality risk more like, on your shoulders. And what that means is we can pay you dollar for dollar a whole lot more if we wait till you're 80 or 85 to do so. Okay, what else do I need to know? Yeah, if you die between now and then, the money evaporates. And that's where things come screeching to a halt. Oh, well, that doesn't sound like a good deal. I had this conversation a few years ago with my older son. He's like, that doesn't sound like a good deal. And I said, well, you're 6 feet under. What do you care? He goes, I want my kids to get something. Okay, well, what if we structure it as a cash back option? And what does that cost me in terms of income? Well, of course, it's, you're taking optionality back. You're going to get less income. The participant always ends up in the same spot. So that's something we need to wrestle with. It is a very efficient way to deliver income for life. It's got a little bit of behavioral hair around it. We as an industry need to think a lot more about that, I think.
Well, Doug, you've shared a ton of great info today, and I know we've covered a lot of ground, but certainly I know this is a very broad and expansive topic. So for today, is there anything that we've missed that you would have hoped that we chatted about that we didn't?
Rick, I don't think so. You've asked a bunch of really great questions, and you've afforded me very kindly the opportunity to rattle on a little bit, and I really appreciate it. I would say a couple of things to our listeners here. One is, and we said it before, avail yourself of the very capable services of your advisor. These are folks who have thought long and hard about these sorts of things. They've kicked the tires hard with us providers. I can say that personally, no question about it. You guys rightly push us on these things, and we engage in great deep dialogue. Secondly, don't be afraid to have the conversation with record keepers and with other providers, even asset managers who've done a lot of thinking in this space. There are many, many resources out there, and the conversation is ready and ripe and sort of revving its engines, waiting for sponsors to engage in. And I just want to say, Rick, thanks again for your patience with me rattling on so much, for getting up early today to chat. It's a pleasure to discuss, and you guys are in the vanguard, I think, on this topic.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate everything you shared. Super helpful. I know I learned a ton. And certainly, as we revisit this topic and as it continues to gain more traction, would love to have you back in the future.
Oh, God bless. I look forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun. Thanks, Rick.
And there you have it. Doug McIntosh, Prudential, Vice President of Investments, obviously very well informed and very up to speed on what's going on in the retirement income world. If nothing else, I think this is a conversation that a lot of employers are going to be having in 2021 and looking forward into the future as to what approach they might want to take. And for me, the big benefit here of having something that addresses retirement income in workplace retirement plans, that gives options to hopefully reduce stress, reduce the anxiety for people making that transition into retirement, gives them a little better idea of where income could be coming from. Now, how they fill their days, that we can't help with. That's up to them. But anywho, something I think that will be a big conversation here in the years to come. Coming up on the podcast, we have some more great episodes as we round out 2020. Up next will be a conversation about stable value. And then we have some other fun stuff in the works that I will look forward to sharing with you soon. Don't forget, also, if you like what you hear from some of the guests, look them up on social media, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, whatever it might be. Connect with them, share your feedback. Love to hear it, whether it was me or with our guests. Regardless, they're here to help, and they're here to share a lot of the information they've gleaned and garnered over the years. So don't forget to do that as well. That's it for today. Until next time, I hope you make your Friday a 401k Friday. And now for some disclosures. The content in this podcast is provided for educational and discussion purposes only. Investing involves risk, including a potential loss of investment. Lockton does not and cannot guarantee the future performance or specific level of performance, the success of any investment, or success of any strategy. Nothing contained herein may be construed as investment or legal advice.